So today, we have a panel of speakers. I would like to introduce them. First, we have Peter Robertson. Peter has been referred to as a change maker on behalf of Fresno's disenfranchised and marginalized communities. For the past 35 years, he's been passionate about serving others and strives to lead by example. A four-time graduate of Fresno State, the genesis for his activism was fostered as an undergraduate student. He was a founding member of United Student Pride, a co-founder of the Fresno Real Pride Film Festival, and named a Grand Marshal for the inaugural Fresno Rainbow Pride Parade. Most recently, he was selected the graduate student speaker for the 9th annual Rainbow Graduation Celebration. As a Fresno State staff member, he has continued to advocate for creating a sense of belonging and maintaining respect for students, alumnus, and allies, as well as faculty and staff. As a volunteer, he established the Bulldog Pride Fund and started the Rainbow Alumnus and Allies Club. Robertson is the director of Alumni Connections with the Fresno State Alumni Association, where he has worked for 20 years. Next, we have Patsy Montgomery. Patsy has been an ally and advocate of women, children, and the LGBTQ community since the 1980s, when she worked as a children's advocate for Rape Counseling Services of Fresno, and recently retired from Planned Parenthood Marmonte after 31 years.
So I made this little poster, and on the upper left is Brooke, who was with IDC, and he performed at Fresno State the night that the evening of the afternoon that the KK was on campus. And then on the right is, upper right is Jessie, Empress Jessie 1 and 4, and on the lower left is Sarah Dworkin, Dr. Dworkin, who's a professor emeritus of Fresno State, and then that's me, a young me, on the lower right. But there, we had such a challenge even at Fresno State, starting our club and burning our booth and building a new one, painted it pink and lavender. I mean, there was just so much anger, and I think a lot of us were scared in our community.
So talk about how that anger fueled you guys and got you to move forward instead of retreating.
Well, I think we're stubborn. I think we're resilient. I think the power of allyship was important. I didn't realize how important that was. So I'm really glad that Patsy's here as an ally, because she's been a steadfast ally since I've met you. It was a tender moment for me talking about this.
So, and at that time, the early days, the AIDS crisis was happening too.
Yes, yeah.
So, I mean, our community was prejudiced against in a lot of ways. I remember a lot of people wouldn't even talk about AIDS because they didn't want to be stigmatized. Mm-hmm. So, did you have trouble recruiting people to participate in the Pride Parade because they felt they would be stigmatized by it?
Perhaps. I can't answer that. I would think it would be very likely. But I can tell you, with our club at Fresno State, we had a lot of stigmatism, some internalized homophobia, some internalized heterosexism from other LGBTQ plus members of our community.
What about the administration? How were they about it?
That's a good question. I think they were a live and let live. I didn't see a tremendous amount of support at that time. But I also didn't see a tremendous amount of, against.
So they just kind of let it out.
I think it was, yeah. I mean, that's completely 180 degrees change now, I think. We've gone a long way. I think we have a long way to go, but I do want to reflect and pause and honor that we've come a long way.
And you were one of the first Grand Marshals in the Pride Parade, right?
Yeah, with those other three people.
And how did that come about? I remember when we talked, you said you didn't think you deserved to be the Grand Marshal.
Oh no, I didn't. I said thank you, Chris. No, I didn't want. I didn't want to do it. Not because I didn't want to do it because I was scared. I just didn't think I'd done enough.
Right.
And I thought there were other people in our community that have probably done more. And so I didn't feel I had reached that level of honor yet in my life.
And I remember, I was at the first Pride Parade, and I've been at every one, I think, except one. I think the first Pride Parade lasted 15 minutes.
Maybe
If,
10.
yeah.
You know.
22.
Yeah, was it
22 minutes,
22?
yeah.
It was short. It was short. And,
Nothing like it is now.
yeah, I remember being on the back of a Mercedes-Benz 450 SL.
Wow, you remember the details of that.
With Sarah DeWorkin and holding her hand
Oh,
on the.
Yeah, because as I said, that was when the AIDS crisis happened too. So as we were coming out in the community and participating in the first Pride Parade, we were losing people right and left as well. So it was a hard time. Let's go to Patsy for a second. Patsy's an ally, and I think not enough can be said from our community to our allies. They are critically important to how we get forward, how we gain our rights. And Patsy's one of the best allies. What's your first memory of Fresno Pride, and what motivated your participation?
well, my first memory of Fresno Pride was the first Pride Parade, but also leading up to it, when you talk about the 80s, and especially the late 80s, and the AIDS crisis, and what was happening, and the real fear that people had, either within the community or of the straight community, of people with AIDS, like even touching someone or hugging someone, if you're in the same room. People, you have to remember, people were talking about concentration camps. And I mean, history is so important to know and to remember. And I just remember, you know, I had an uncle who he still to this day will not say that he is gay, but we all know he's sort of that bachelor uncle who's in his, I think he might even be 90 now, but he is the most wonderful man and his lifelong partner, you know. And it's, when you think about the fact that they couldn't even get married, you know, those kinds of things just weren't right.
How long has he been with his partner?
His partner is deceased now, but he was with him for over 50 years.
So it was well known that he was gay, but he never...
Well, nobody talked about it.
Right.
So you have to understand it, even that group of friends. You know, he lives in Southern California. When my daughter went to UC Irvine, she would have dinner and cocktails with his group of fabulous friends, you know, every Friday night, and have cocktails and just a wonderful time. But we've always known that out of respect, he would tell us, it's not our business.
Right.
We just knew that these two people loved one another. They shared a home and a life together. And to me, one of the outrageous things, and it really didn't hit me as much until I lost my husband when my husband died. And it was during the year of Meet in the Middle for Equality. And really thinking about, in Prop 8, about the fact that people who can't get married and even though they pay taxes, they raise families, they did not have the same rights as everyone else. But going back to the beginning of Pride, just knowing that you just need to show up for people. You need to be there to witness history and to witness, you know, dykes on bikes saying to the KKK, you're not going to mess with our people here. You know, those kinds of things are important.
And what did your uncle's generation, if you know this, or what would he have thought of the Pride parades and all the festivities that surround
Well, I think
that?
he would probably sit at home, he'd celebrate it, but he would not be someone who would go out. You know, it's like having a sense that he is part of like a Hollywood community. You know, his partner owned antique shops and vintage stores in Beverly Hills and Bel Air, and so they ran with a crowd that was affluent, but also very close because of the discrimination they faced, the fact that you could lose businesses. The Central Valley is so conservative that, like my husband was a financial planner, he's a stockbroker, and he couldn't have a D after his name as a Democrat without losing business or being unemployed. People look at those kinds of things. That's this valley. So if you were to say that you are gay or a lesbian or then you're not going to be able to move up, you know, and have upward mobility. If you identified back in the early 90s at the time of the parade, then when it began, then you could lose your job.
Right.
You could have that discrimination. we're very lucky that in California, in the 1980s, the mid to late 1980s, I think it was, California started counting hate crimes against the LGBTQ community. The other states didn't do that. So we can say that, that in Fresno in 1990, the KKK showed up and it was there were physical attacks. I became more involved because of attacks against gay men that were happening outside of the Express and murders that were happening, and saying, no, you need to stand with them. I remember being a parent club president of an elementary school when Clovis Unified, and I lived at a country club, and I spoke at this candlelight vigil in March that happened in the Tower District, and suddenly at the next parent club meeting, all these people were asking me, did I leave my husband? Is there something that they needed to know? Like, am I still married? And I go, what are you talking about? Well, we saw you on TV talking at that gay thing. So obviously you must be gay. And that was one of the first things that it really hit me. Like, all these people think I'm gay or lesbian because...
So in your mind, you didn't think this was going to equate to you being gay or lesbian. You were just out helping people.
That's right. But you're standing with someone in a community that's being attacked. But the other thing is, I didn't give a rat's ass, and I didn't depend on those people for my livelihood. I had the support of my husband, of my spouse, and my life partner in all of the things. And he was very quiet. He was more conservative in some areas. He's socially liberal. But he stood by me on all of that stuff. And having a partner in life, whether it's someone of the same sex or same gender, or of the opposite gender, is so important to be able to have people that you can come home to who lift you up. And he knew that with our children, we wanted to raise a family that respected people and practiced the golden rule. That's what this was. But
your husband was a Republican, wasn't he?
yes, he was.
Yes, he was.
Uh-huh.
And let's talk about your grandson a little bit, because we talked about this.
Yeah.
Share with us that story about your grandson.
About his...
About the Pride Parade.
Oh, about the Pride Parade. I'll tell you, I had, when I worked for Planned Parenthood, I worked for their 501c4, their electoral arm as well. And I had made a promise to go to Simi Valley to do some canvassing and knock on doors. My daughter was a single mom. And so I let Arda know that, we can't, that he needed to come with me because his mother was working and she worked at the hospital downtown and as an RN. And I told him, and he says, sure, that's fine. He was used to going with me wherever. And then he could read, and he said, but what's that date that we have to go knock on doors? And I told him, and he says, that's the Pride Parade. We can't do that. And I said, no, well, Arda, I gave my word. I have to keep my word. And he goes, but the Pride Parade is our family tradition.
And he was how old when this happened?
Yeah, I think he was in kindergarten.
Oh, wow.
He was either 4 or 5. But it was, for him, it was so powerful that this is it. So, and he's 10 years old now, and he still considers Pride as his family tradition. When I became involved with the Pride Planning Committee, and then COVID hit, and so we were talking about how we were going to handle some things and what events we could do kind of virtually. He told his friends at school, and 2 of his friends came out to him. One, a girl, this is in the 3rd grade, that she was biromantical. And then the other friend was a boy who identifies gay and told him. And I asked Art, I go, what did you say to them? And he goes, I asked them if their families are supportive.
Wow.
Because if they're not, our family would be. And so that is so important, that when you surround people with non-judgmental and just love, and that this is normal, how people love and who they love.
Yeah, it's the importance of visibility, not just in the LGBTQ community, but
Right.
allies being visible in their support for the LGBTQ community.
I want to also say that it's important for schools to be able to teach history correctly. So in the 1st grade, after the 1st grade, between his 1st and 2nd grade of school, we were watching Hidden Figures together. And so I wanted to explain to him segregation in a way that I thought a 1st grader could understand. And he looked at me, and his word for me is anne anne, which is Turkish for mother's mother. And he says, are you talking about segregation? Like, he was confused, like he's talking to an idiot. And I said, yes. And I go, how do you know that word? And he explained he learned it in the 1st grade in his social studies class. And he completely explained it, of what it was. And then he said, and did you know that the Pride Parade we have as a family tradition, that started with Stonewall?
Wow.
That was from his first grade social studies teacher at Yokomi Elementary School.
Which we all know is in great jeopardy right now because education is shifting.
Threatened, right.
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to talk about certain things.
So that is important, that he had a basis in learning, and he learned not just from me and his mother and his family, but he learned from school.
Right.
And he learned real history, not fake history, so.
That's a great story. Cindy, I want to talk to you for a minute about, you've been one of the principal and powerful players in the LGBTQ community, particularly in the beginning of the movement in Fresno. Tell us why you got involved.
When I came to Fresno in 1978, I had been in a relationship for almost 6 years, and so I was single, which was kind of new, and I was barely 21 at the time.
And where did you come from?
Actually, my partner grew up in Porterville, so when I got out of the service, we moved to Porterville. So I went to Porterville Junior College, and when I got out of the service, I came out of the closet. I opened the door and said, I am never going back in. Now, I've been in the military for 39 and a half years, and I managed to juggle that by separating my life, but I've been actively involved in this community since 1978. When I hit the ground, I went to City College for 1 semester, and then I was the president of the Gay People's Union at Fresno State when William Fagerman was its advisor in 1978. In 1979, the Fresno State invited me as the president of the Gay People's Union to sit on a committee that was hiring the new dean for student activity. So back then, I followed Marcia Koenig, who pretty much a lot of people in this room know who that is. She was one of the founding members of the Gay People's Union.
And what did the Gay People's Union do?
It was the Gay People's Union was at Fresno State. It was the gay, in those days, you either were gay or lesbian. Well, when I came out of the closet, I was gay. I never really called myself a lesbian until probably the 90s, because my core group, when I came to Fresno and was not going back in the closet, we had the Circle, we had the bar on Blackstone.
Express?
No, the other one. The Biz.
The Biz, okay.
And then we had the show, and then we had the one out on 99, or well, now it's Blackstone, but way up.
Right. Is that the Orange Ogre? Is that what was out there?
No, that was the, oh man, not the Showboat. It was the,
Showbiz was one of them.
yeah, that's the one down, that was
Okay.
downtown.
Okay.
But when I went to a women's meeting at the Now House, and it was supposed to be a lesbian rights committee meeting, and it was a potluck. And so I show up with my bright pink shirt, and I think I'm barely 21 years old. My hair was red in those days. And someone asked me what I did. And I said, I'm a career queer. You could have dropped a pin in that room. I'm standing in a room of 20 women that are identifying as lesbians, and they're shocked that I'm calling myself a gay woman.
And what year was this?
That was in 1978. And so I walked out of the Now House, which was on Van Ness, out of the basement, because they wouldn't let them have the potluck in the main floor. And I walked out of there and never looked back at the women's movement. I embedded myself in the Gay People's Union at Fresno State, and then the next thing I know, Les Gatewood has me building stuff for Tiffany at Dougal Ball and for building sets, and I just sort of went from there.
So I want to talk about how you got involved in the Pride Parade, but I'd also like to talk about, you published the Q&A News for
15
15
years.
years, and a local LGBTQ newspaper. Tell us about that and your challenges getting that published.
Well, I had a lot of trouble finding someone to publish it because it was a real live newspaper. It was on newsprint. Before, we had kind of a little newspaper that was it was like a little magazine. It usually had 8 pages in it. I was the editor of that for 2 years and then changed its format. It was actually ran by Gus, Gay United Services. Then I started Q&A News, and it started out as trying to find a name for the paper, and we just put Q&A on the paper, and then it just sort of went from there. I had a lot of trouble with getting someone to print it, where I didn't have to send it to Sacramento to have it printed.
You mean the actual printing?
The actual printing of the paper. But actually, the Sanger Herald finally printed it, and they printed it for the whole 15 years.
Wow.
Anyway, what I would like to say about the original Pride Parade in 1991, 14 people planned that parade, and they were from across the board. But the 14 people met at the community center that was on Belmont. At that time, it was Gay United Services and CVAP. And those 14 people met because Queer Nation was going to picket, was going to protest City Hall. Now, we didn't have the big fancy City Hall we have now in 1990. But Karen Humphrey had been mayor, and she was very, very supportive of the community, of getting things done. She wrote the very first proclamation we ever had, and it really wasn't even a proclamation for the parade, it was for Gay United Services. And one of the other city council members gave Q&A News a proclamation at one time. Craig Chardon,
Yeah.
which you would think was like, that's a crazy idea if you knew that person. But those 14 people met, and Queer Nation was there, MCC was there, that was Metropolitan Community Church. We had representatives from there was a representative from PFLAG, because PFLAG was involved, was a group at the church on Barstow. But Queer Nation was there, the IDC was there. The Imperial Dove Court. I was there as a member of the original board of Community Link, but it wasn't, you were representing yourself, you weren't representing the organization.
Because at that time, Pride wasn't run by Community Link, right?
No, Pride was ran by these 14 people under the guise of Gay United Services, but only for, we weren't a project of Gay United Services. We were 14 people that decided, and, half those people were Queer Nation members.
So why did you come to a decision to have a Pride Parade in Fresno? It's 1991.
Because if we don't do it now, when are we going to do it?
Right.
And if we don't, okay, so I kind of have a little bit of legacy here. But there are people in our community who, even though they're gay or lesbian, they identify as gay and lesbian in their living room, or when they go to the gay bar on a Saturday afternoon and they're wearing their skivvies at the Red Lantern. But they don't identify when it comes to outside on the street when you're walking by them. They might at the park,
Yeah,
where they might get arrested,
but not as a political action.
but not as a political action. And there are a lot of gay people and lesbian people and queer people who do not want to be actively political. And we ran into that a lot because 501c3s had to be very, very careful that they had to have other designations. They couldn't spend their money giving it to a political candidate. Or we couldn't spend our money against Proposition 2, which was the anti-teacher, gay teacher proposition, but we all, as members of the IDC, or the members of MCC, Metropolitan Community Church, or of some other churches in town, would picket, go door to door with our flyers, please don't fire gay
As
teachers.
individuals, right.
As individuals.
Right.
And that's what happened the first year. 14 people came together and said, it's time. Now, before that, we had the shopping cart parades, and I was one of the people who started that at the metro station downstairs in the underground. Because Bruce, we spent months building these beautiful floats for the San Francisco Gay Parade, and Jerry wrote on them, and Doug wrote on them, and 1 and 4 wrote on them, and Tiffany wrote on them, and we would win awards, but we couldn't do it in our own town. And so we started doing the shopping cart for those people here that weren't going to the San Francisco Parade, and so we started doing it at the Metro.
For people that couldn't do it publicly.
And create, we like building things. We like making things pretty. Trust me. I don't necessarily I want them sturdy. I don't want them to fall down. But
That's why the gay men and the lesbians work so
work
well
so well together. Well, you can ask Tiffany about that. But that's, and I worked at community theater with Bruce Parker, who is Elaine Behringer, Empress 10. That's how I learned to do sets. That's how I learned to do lighting, was I went and volunteered at community theater.
So at that first Pride Parade, did people build their own floats? Did you guys as a committee build floats?
We didn't have any floats. We had the back of cars. We had the back, well, the Red Lantern built a float. The Express had a float. Very little clothes, but had a float. Very little.
Some of them in their skivvies, I'm sure.
Yeah, Speedos. I
Speedos,
believe we
okay.
had. We did make them wear Speedos. However, we did have some of them wearing their chaps. We had some people in our community that complained about butt cheeks hanging out, as long as there wasn't genitalia showing. The 14 of us who put on the parade and the festival didn't care. Now, I was 8.5 months pregnant when we did the very first one. Elizabeth was born 3 weeks later. So, that was just our time.
Right. So, Jay, let's talk to you for a minute here. You've been on the Pride Committee since 2015. Tell us about what you do with on the Pride Committee.
Well, I actually started just volunteering to set up the festival with my partner. I joked that I made the mistake of telling her that I wanted to be involved in the community, and then the next thing you know, I'm involved in the community. Soon after that, when Rachel Bowman retired, basically, from volunteering, I stepped up and took over, which is a lot of logistics and equipment, ordering equipment, making sure that the festival runs smoothly, that we have security, that we have porta potties, we have fencing, that pretty much anything that needs to be at the festival, any kind of equipment needs to be at the festival, I will take care of that.
And this year it was very different. It was at Fresno City College after a couple of years off because of COVID.
Yes, it was.
And there were some challenges, but I thought you guys pulled it off incredibly well.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of the challenges from this year.
I think the biggest challenge was working with basically the logistics of always being in Tower and trying to transfer it to a whole other site, and then I was mostly trying to figure out how to translate it basically to how are we gonna have the same setup but in a different thing, and some of the challenges ended up being that our fencing wasn't secure, our porta potties weren't enough.
But on the other hand,
oh yeah.
what a great venue. It worked. There were some glitches, but that's to be expected in a new place after 30 years. But you guys pulled it off really, really well.
I thought it was a great success for being our first time somewhere else.
And we're going to be there next year too, right?
Yes,
Or this,
we
yeah.
And even bigger. And I want to say that Jay has a binder and is such a detail-oriented strategist, I would call. And it's, the only way this could come off is because of your organizational skills and strategy.
Which I'm gonna say it is a big influence from Jeff. Jeff is the one who started with the binders, and I just went, well, that's a great idea, let's do that.
And this was the first year without Jeff Robinson, who passed away in March of
Yes.
this year.
Yes, it was.
And you guys pulled it together. I'm sure at the beginning of that, there were thoughts, how can we go on without Jeff, right?
Some, but I think a lot of us were very, like, this is gonna happen because of Jeff. Like, he trained us very well, he knew every single one of our strengths, our weaknesses, and he made sure that we would be able to work as a team.
Okay, and just so everyone knows, Jay and I had a previous conversation before today, so he's okay with me talking about the next thing we're gonna talk about, which is that you're 39 years old,
Yes,
and you only came out 7 years ago.
yes.
Can you talk about your journey to deciding to come out? What stopped you from coming out in the Central Valley? What issues were around that?
Well, actually listening to a lot of the history that was said, it really was like a big journey for me coming out. I started questioning my sexuality before I questioned my gender, and that was back in 97, 98. And by then, I had already seen it in, like, being in the school system. I had already seen how much of a influence in a positive way the Pride Parade had in Fresno, to the point where I would be making, like, book reports on the beauty of same-sex couples adopting children, or why equality was a big deal, and it was just accepted by my teachers as okay, are you part of the community? And I'd be like, because, you never know.
And was that the reason you never knew what the repercussions would be if you decided to come out?
The repercussions that I knew was mostly because at the time, a lot of the news had stories about, like, Matthew Shepard and Tina Brandon, and the fear of that happening to somebody as myself, especially as a trans person, it just pushed me so far into the closet that it took me forever to really come out.
But you came out right at the same time you started working with the Pride Parade, right?
Yes, I came out September 2015. I was working with Pride Parade December 2015, and I don't know, I took a liking to every single person in that committee at the time. I remember making a joke of, one day I'm going to shadow Jeff, and 3 years later I was shadowing Jeff.
So your experiences were very positive with the Rainbow Pride Parade?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
this community honestly saved my life.
That's great, that's great. All right, Paul, let's talk to you for a little bit.
Hi.
Paul/Leilani Price. Tell us why you're so entrenched in the Fresno Rainbow Pride Parade and what motivates you to keep and stay involved.
Honestly, it had to be Jeff Robinson. When I met Jeff, he literally just like kind of took me under his wing. I'm best known as like a shit talker, and he would pull me aside and we'd talk shit at events with one another. And then he realized that I think he realized that I was, one of my strengths, as Jay mentioned, is fundraising and coming up with really good ideas and executing them. And he was like, hey, I want you to be a part of this. I went to a few meetings, was like, no, this is not for me. And then during my reign as Empress, I believe there was like a $3,000 unexpected fee that came in from the city about the fencing. And I was like, all right, well, we just had our first event, so here's $3,000. I remember the IDC was completely pissed off with me because they're like, you can't do this. And I was like, we raised the money, it's in there, give it to them. Ruffled some feathers, but made it happen. Gonna get emotional. Jeff called me and was like, you saved the parade. And I was like, no, you saved the parade. You reached out to me, you came to me, we worked together, and we got it. And then the next year, was it the next year? I think it was the next year, I was Grand Marshal. And ever since then, I've been involved in every single thing. Any and every event that we've had, there's either been someone that's come to me and asked for guidance, or what things we can implement, or what new things that we can do, and I'm glad just to be a part of the team.
Do you feel the general community benefits from Pride as well as the LGBTQ community?
Absolutely. I think when we have a parade or there's a
function or an event, it's always important to invite everyone, so that way we show that if we want to be all included, we need to show people what we're including them as well. So for me, it's very important, and that's one of the things I like to do is I like to go into unsafe places and make them safe for our community. And it's one of the things that I love to do is working with businesses and organizations and showing them, hey, our money is green, your money is green, let's work together to make it happen, and we can benefit off of each other.
So talk a little bit about, we all know this, it's been happening since the first Pride Parade happened in New York. Media covers us because we're colorful, and they generally tend to focus on the colorful people in the Pride Parade. As a drag queen, I'm sure you have faced some of this. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the fact that sometimes the media portrays us as Cindy was saying, you know, it's people out in their chaps and not much clothing and not having a good influence on society?
Well, I think media is very one-sided, so anytime, even with news, it's always a perspective of things, it's never the true story of it. I feel like anytime there is like a news coverage, you take it with a grain of salt. Are there people in our community that are overly excessive or body positivity or like to show their body? Absolutely, but then there's people like myself who, you know, like to go and do things like this and represent our community in a positive way. Obviously, we're not getting media coverage, we're not showing the positive things that our community can do, but we're only seeing what's going to get the media station or the news stations the views, and that's us being out, being portrayed as villains. And I mean, I've gone to several news stations and I've talked, and I did Drag Queen Story Hour here in Fresno. You know, RuPaul tweeted about it, and there was so much anger and animosity, and I went on the news and I was like, you guys can stop now, I'm reading to kids. You know, Tracy's here, hi Tracy. You know, she was part about that, you know, and it was just, there was nothing wrong with what we're doing. You know, I think the media is always going to try to pick someone to be the villain, and it's best that we have leaders like we have up here today, and even out in the audience, that they continue to show and be that positive light in our community.
And what about at your like 9-to-5 job? When you must talk about Pride, it must come up around the time of June. Do you ever hear people at work or in other social circles say, I wish you guys really don't need to do Pride anymore. What's the point of it? Why are you still doing it, 50 years later?
I actually most recently transitioned to a newer job. It's a little bit more corporate, you could say. I had put my pronouns, and I list them as he, him, they. And questions came out flying to my 4 supervisors underneath me, and we have a total of 114 employees, and some of the employees are going to the soups like, what does this mean? Like, is it he's throwing his sexuality at us? And they're like, no, and I had to educate my staff on that, so that way in case that someone did ask that question. My boss most recently just came to one of my run shows because he's trying to understand our community, and I thought it was a very good opportunity for me to educate him on the things that we do. Yes, we do like to have fun. We like champagne and mimosas and the brunches, but we also do a lot of work. So during Jeff's passing, he actually allowed me some time to go and do some things I needed to do for Jeff and the committee and to be a part of those things. So he understands. I think one of the things that you have to do is educate people. When people are afraid of something, it's because they lack knowledge of it. So the more that you can educate them, the easier it does become.
So we know what's going on in Florida and Texas with drag queen story hours and drag performances at restaurants and DeSantis, who I like to call the Spawn. What do you think, how do you think we combat that? Because we don't want to retreat and not do these things anymore. How do you think we combat the concept that society sometimes has about us as being grooming their children?
I like to refer things back to how are we different from any music artist. You have, and this is no like shame on anyone, but you have like Nicki Minaj and Cardi B, and they're sexually explicit, and this, my body, this. To me, that's more grooming than a drag queen who is fully clothed, layered in tights, wig and makeup, educating your child on something. I mean, obviously kids are not in bars, they're not in church. I mean, hopefully kids are in churches, but they're not in bars, they're not going and participating in any of these functions. So, and for me, when we did Drag Queen Story Hour, we actually had the queens do a background check just to make sure that we couldn't get anything back of, oh, this person was a registered sex offender,
Right.
because I wanted to make sure all of our boxes were checked, so that way if anyone had anything negative to say, here's the proof in the pudding. And I think that's how you combat it, is that you educate your team on ways to, I guess, respond correctly to these types of negativity.
And you do your prep work.
And you have to do your prep work. I will say this, if you're a queen, do not read the comments in the news section, because
Right.
you will want to fight every single
Yeah,
person.
every person, exactly. So this is,
I just want to bring up
Yeah.
too, that the media likes to project these false equivalencies, you know, that all gay people are drag queens or are outrageous. And they never call out, you know, the Southern Baptist Convention or the Roman Catholic Church for hiding abuse of children for decades.
or religion in general
And
for grooming
yeah.
children from a very young age to be religious when they don't have a mind yet to make up their own, so.
Thank you. Or throwing their kids out because they've come out.
Right.
So it's, and I'm sick and tired of all of that. That you don't have to then go to, like, shows someone who's being themselves on a day of celebration, and then, or doing a story time, a drag queen story time, and then going and shifting over to some pastor talking about how this is dangerous. You know, why aren't you asking them about the activities they do that are dangerous and that they've supported and hidden? So that's my
No,
rant for the
bingo,
moment.
bingo. So I throw this out to the panel to get back on the pride conversation here. Why do we continue to need pride celebrations? Jay, what do you think?
Honestly, working with the Youth Alliance, a lot of these kids are still struggling in school, and with parents being able to be accepted. We get a lot of kids in the foster system who just have unsupported parents who just can't live at home due to just either being kicked out or the abuse that they suffer.
So what does the pride parade do for them?
Honestly, I feel like it represents, it shows them that there's happy queer adults out there, and that if you can just hold on for a little bit longer, you're gonna make it.
Peter, what do you think?
That's a really good question. I think for me, I think it's important to have Rainbow Pride Parade because I think our community needs to see a reflection of themselves in a public space. I think it's one thing to see it on TV, it's another thing to attend. And I think it creates a sense of place and a sense of belonging for our community that we can all come together for one day. And I think that's why it's important. We've all heard, you know, when's the straight parade? Why don't we have a straight parade? And when people say that, I know that's why we need a pride parade.
They do that in Modesto,
Yes,
and violence turns
Yeah,
out.
violent, that was
Yeah,
just recently, that was
yeah.
2 or 3
And
days
it's the
ago.
violence from the white Christian
Right,
nationalists. Yeah.
exactly. Cindy, what do you think?
Well, I think that we need a pride parade because this year, Fresno Unified School District actually, for the first time, had a float and had almost 200 kids and staff and teachers in the parade and attended the festival in mass.
Yeah, that was amazing.
That was amazing. I mean, we had 14,000 people at the festival. The police department says we had at least 16,000 witnessing the parade. That's not counting the participants. So I think that we don't just need it for ourselves and for our community, but we need it for the non-gay community, the non-LGBT community. We need to show them that we take pride in who we are. And I think that that's why.
Yeah, I think, I think those of us in the community, we get used to ourselves in a way, and we think, okay, same-sex marriage is legal. We have every right.
For
we can-
now.
For now, every right we can possibly have in the state of California. And then we see what's happening in Florida and Texas. I'll just share a brief story that happened a few years ago when I was running the community center that was run by Gay Central Valley. I was manning the phones that day, and a trans teen kid called up, just distraught, wanting to kill himself. And over the next month, 2 months, this was right before Pride, he and I talked on the phone many, many times. I had to talk him out from running away many times. And then I said, just come to the Pride Parade. Come and see me, I'll be at the booth there. Because we had never met, we'd only talked by phone. And he came out and he had never seen the community before. He didn't know it existed. I ran into that over and over at the community center with people coming in and saying, where do I meet, a woman would come in, where do I meet women? I have no idea. They had no idea. We all take for granted all these social groups we have around town, but there are people out there that have no idea. So that's very critical that we stay in the public eye and we have these events and we have these discussions so that people who are not able to, who are afraid to, who don't know that we're here can recognize that we're here to support them. I just wanted to say one more thing. I want Peter and Leilani to talk about,
We're in trouble now.
yeah, you are. So talk about your hosting of the Pride Parade. You used to host it with Jeff. Obviously, Jeff is gone now. Tell me how you guys got involved being the spokespersons in front of Irene's Cafe, and just talk a little bit about that.
You want to go first?
Of course he does.
Of course.
No, maybe. You know that I was a Grand Marshal the first year, and the next year Jeff asked to help be a Grand Marshal. I mean, in fact, I was a Grand Marshal. To help be an MC, and we did that for many years, and we did our best. And then it was great to have Leilani come join us because we went from good to better, or from better to best. And this last parade was almost too much. It was a 2-hour memorial service, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was really rough. I think for me, Jeff and I always had this conversation of, he's always put me on this pedestal. You're the first, you're the best. We always have to put you, our best foot forward. He would always tell me, oh, you're gonna get on Drag Race, you're gonna bring home the crown. And when I got involved and he was like, I want you to MC with me, and I was like, that's a lot of people, Jeff. I talk a lot of shit, so it's gonna be hard for me to keep it PC. I think I got off, I was on a float, got off the float, and that was my first year with you guys. Walked around, got on the mic, and it went, like it was so smooth. Our chemistry, all three of us together, was just amazing. This last one, Peter, you're right. It was difficult because of the impact of Jeff. I mean, I felt like the pressure was on both of us because all eyes were on us. We have to carry the torch for him. And then it got brought to my attention that at a city hall meeting or some type of meeting, there was going on, educational thing. Someone had said that I said something inappropriate on the mic at some school district meeting or whatever, so they were coming after me. And you know what? Guess what? I didn't. I'm really good at censoring myself. And I think going back to the whole kid thing and all this other stuff is, Queens, we know we're professional for the most part, other than being late. We know when to turn it on, when we can be inappropriate. We know when there's kids around. It's like we treat them as if they're our own, like brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, and those types of things. And that's again something that I've learned from Jeff. Although Jeff was,
Jeff had a mouth.
He had a mouth. He had a mouth on it. But
I said this to somebody recently, a question that happened, this was about the zoo event, the drag show event at the zoo. I was on a podcast and they questioned how they know what drag queens do in bars. How is it going to be any different at the zoo? And I said, because they're performers and they know their audience, and what they're going to do at a bar is not what they're going to do at the zoo. Just like Celine Dion may wear one dress in Vegas, but she's not going to wear it at a charity event for polio or something like that. I mean, it's just people know what they're doing and they don't give us that credit.
right. And I think that's just something that people will turn their eye on or turn their
Well, this year was really hard for the parade because we were so accustomed to Jeff being that, all that knowledge he had in his head.
The force,
And he
yeah.
could ad-lib, and he knew everybody. He knew every organization's history. He had relationships with everybody and every organization. And so it was all up here. And he could yak, and then they'd see the next one and be yak. But this year, we had to it was really hard to get the groups to give us the narrative that they wanted because we knew that we didn't have Jeff. And we were trying to get narratives for them. The book was a mess. I mean, the parade, Fresno Unified District's driver stepped out of the truck 2 seconds before he was supposed to leave to go on the parade route. So, I mean, the book they had, each one had a book, but it didn't make any difference because they were out of order.
Yeah. But what's important, you know.
But they made it work.
Yeah.
They made me look successful because, you know, I'm in the middle of the road screaming, why are you not in?
Yeah, so Cindy's position, and for those who don't know, in the Pride Parade is usually being in the middle of the road directing people, and it can get kind of crazy.
But for 22 years, it was Patricia Colucci.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. And during the pandemic, we lost 3 major movers, shakers and movers in the Pride Committee. We
Yeah.
lost Susan Kuhn, who was one of the biggest benefactors, financial benefactors for our community. We lost Patricia Colucci, who had been, for 22 years, had been the chair of the parade, Jeff's counterpart, and we lost Jeff. And we lost them all within 6 months. We lost Patty and Jeff in a week.
Yeah.
It was a week between the two of them.
Also Zoyer.
And we lost Zoyer too.
He was a very big part.
Yeah, and he was a very big part of our
And
community.
that's why this is important, and that's why Quistry exists, to start documenting people, because we were stalled by COVID for a couple of years, but we want to keep this going. You guys and everybody involved in Pride, you decided to keep going. There were a lot of people in the community that were saying, is it gonna happen? Is it gonna fall apart because Jeff is gone? But you know what Jeff would want? Jeff would want it to go on, and he'd want us to pull
And
together.
that's exactly what every single one of us said.
Yeah,
He said it needed to be the biggest, the best Pride we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, we pulled it off.
yeah,
Could I add one thing
Yeah.
that I really like about the Fresno Parade that I don't know if people realize is the parade in Fresno is on a Saturday because there were churches in Fresno that wanted to participate in the parade. And for me, if you've ever been to a parade in San Francisco or LA or San Diego, even in Fresno, a lot of religious fanatics will come and protest.
right.
But here in Fresno, religious organizations come and say, we see you, we appreciate you, we love you, come worship with us. And I think that's a beautiful aspect of the Fresno Parade that you don't see anywhere else
And there's
throughout the
a lot of
United States.
churches in
A
the
lot
parade.
of churches.
11. It was 11 this
I
year.
asked
I just
Jeff-
wanted to share that
No,
fact.
because I asked
because-
Jeff that question a few years ago when I was still working at the bar, and I was, you know, all the bar people had to work till 3 a.m., and I went, you know, it's a long day for us, can't we move it, because it used to be on Sunday, can't we move it back to Sunday? And he gave me that very reason why we kept it on a Saturday.
Very intentional, very strategic.
Yeah. So, you guys, thank you so much for doing this. This is our first panel. We want to document your voices, and we have 6 more panels coming up in the next couple of months. You can find that on our website at quistry.org. And you can also email us questions. Please come and join the next panels. They're free. We would like to know now if there's any questions from the audience that anybody would like to ask.
I'm going to say something.
Okay?
Just a quick backstory. As a 17-year-old kid living in southern Ohio, very conservative, hillbilly country, getting into my car and having to drive 70 miles to go to what I had heard was a gay picnic in Columbus. And the fear all the way up, and then the relief once I got there of looking out onto this picnic and seeing people as diverse as this crowd here in the room and up at this panel, and the community that was being expressed, and the acceptance of each person that walked up, no matter who they were, what they looked like, how they were dressed, whether they were in a Speedo or in a complete robe, I knew right then and there I had found my home and my family. And to that story, I want to thank each and every one of you for the part that you have played in bringing this parade to Fresno on a yearly basis, because every year, I guarantee you, there's a child that sees that parade or attends that parade or drives maybe from Porterville or Delano or Dinuba or some town out in the sticks, and he comes in here and he sees it, or she sees it, and they feel it, and it hits their heart, and they know, I'm not alone, there are other people out there. So thank each and every one of you for the part you played in that. And I will forever stand up and applaud and be out and be loud and be proud because of that first parade picnic. And it was called the Kismet Picnic after a bar. But after that, from that moment on, I'm like, nope. There's a community for me, and that's the importance of what you guys do. And I thank you and I applaud you.
Okay, anyone else have a question?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to, like James said, I'd like to thank all of you for your participation in putting this parade together. I know it's a big, big task. And, you know, I was at the first parade back in '91, and I remember it lasted 2 minutes. I mean, Cindy said 22 minutes. But, and the days with the Ku Klux Klan and stuff. I just wonder, what do you see, I have a two-part question really. What do you see the future of the parade? How it will change in the future, and the festival? The festival was fantastic this year. And also, I remember back in the very beginning, first few years, we had San Francisco,
Dags on bikes.
huh?
Dags on bikes.
Well, that's on
Sisters
bikes,
or
but we
what?
had also had
The
the
sisters.
Pride Marching Band, San Francisco Marching Band. But I understand that's way too expensive to bring them. Has the committee ever thought of reaching out to any of the high schools or colleges about a marching band?
Do you mind if I take this one? In regards to the future of Pride, I think as technology advances, you're going to start to see a lot more involvement online, more of a media presence. I can't speak for everyone on the committee, but I would like to continue to see it on Olive, go down Olive, and continue our partnership with Fresno City College. I think the campus is great, it provided ample shade, space, and security for the most part. So I would like to continue to have it there. In terms of, will it continue there? We don't know, we have to see, because this was one of our largest prides, and with the momentum that we do have now with all of our sponsors that are currently rolling in, we are probably gonna see a very similar pride this year as we did last year. Now your second question, Jeff's, in regards to marching bands, Jeff, his wish was for us to make that happen. We have tried several times. I think now that we do have a little bit more of a financial backing, it's something that we can re-look at and see if financially we can do that. I know we did reach out to some schools, specifically high schools, to see if we can get volunteers to come in and kind of work on something together. Unfortunately, that did not work out, but I'm sure the committee would like to revisit that someday soon.
Well, this is the first year that the Fresno Unified School District has been a major, not really a sponsor, but a major participant in the parade and the festival. So I think that the wheels have been greased a little bit, and we may find a little bit, we've even talked about, I know Jeff and I talked about doing a contest with all the local marching bands and giving a prize. That's something that the committee, Tracy, the committee will need to talk about. Well, let's see, committee, we need to talk about.
Okay, I think Kat has a question.
Yeah, so one thing that I'd love to sort of, Cindy, maybe you can talk to, so at the beginning you said it was 14 people. How did it become then under Community Link? And I'm really happy it is, because Quistry is under Community Link, but I would love to know a little bit more of that history.
Well, my understanding is, okay, so I was involved in the first two, and then I had a 2-year-old. And so I was not involved in the third year. And most of the 14 people that were involved in the first one were not involved in the third year, but I was a grand marshal the third year. I was not involved in 4, and then Community Link took it over in 5.
There was a period though too when the Miller Project happened.
But that was Frank Munihan.
Yeah,
That was 3, 4, and I want to say the tail end of 5.
yeah, it was on a Sunday.
Yeah, and it was on Sunday. Yeah.
Right.
But I was a grand marshal, and the other rule it's kind of like an unspoken rule, but you can't serve on the Pride Committee and be a grand marshal. That has been, and so I couldn't be a first grand marshal, I couldn't be the second grand marshal, but the minute I was not on the committee anymore, then I became a grand marshal. But we have several grand marshals. Let's see, I'm trying to think. The besides Peter and me and you and Jules,
I've been in
and
Fresno,
Tiffany's been a Grand Marshal.
and I have the Blue Clips plan.
And you had the Klan. Weren't you there year 2 or 3?
I can't remember, but I also had the religious group there.
Well, we had the Klan, one of the individuals for the Klan took the hood off, and was that year 2 or 3?
That was year
One.
1 or 2?
No, it was 2.
It
was
It wasn't,
two,
it wasn't
okay.
1, because he went to jail. So. Because I guess it's a felony.
Yeah, they were interesting.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that the festival this year was really meaningful, especially after Jeffrey had passed away. And I haven't seen so much love and so many people just gathering around each other and saying how much they love this one person ever. I mean, there were pictures being taken, people saying, hey, he talked about you before, I remember him, he talked about me, he said this and that. And it was also a big year for my friends. One of mine is going by they, them, and they were having difficulty expressing themselves, and that year is when they had took off their shirt, revealed their binder, walking down the parade route with their trans flag. And that was very powerful for them. And then we had 2 other friends whose families weren't accepting, but they still showed up and they still showed their support. And they still had the best time in their life, and they were running around and throwing candy and a bunch of beads and stuff everywhere. And it was so, that parade is so meaningful that my mom even got engaged there. Mardi Gras parade, but still, Pride Committee. It just, the fact that we've made it not just a party, but we've made it a community, and we've made it a memorial, and we've made it so many other things where it's not just showing our pride, but it's showing our appreciation.
Chris,
Thank
you
for
asked
that.
a question earlier, why do we do Pride? That's the reason.
That's the reason, that's visibility. Some people would remain suppressed in the closet if they didn't know there was a community out there to join with. It's too painful without knowing there are people to support, so that's the main reason we do Pride every year.
They never knew until
They never knew, yeah.
After 2 years with COVID, and then seeing Pride this year, I didn't realize how depressed I was until I got to Pride, and then I felt great. And, you know, it's just being out there and being proud and seeing other people you haven't seen in a long time and stuff, and the participation, it's community.
You know, my husband and I went to San Francisco last December for my birthday, and, you know, I've been to San Francisco 1,000 times, but we hadn't been back to Castro in a while. And just the fact that we could walk, now I know it's the Castro, but just the fact that we could walk through the streets holding hands, seeing other men and women kiss each other, and nobody thought a thing about it, that kind of liberation we don't have in Fresno. He tries to hold my hand and kiss me in public all the time, and sometimes I push him away because I'm like, you don't know where we're at, but, you know, it's important to, what'd you say?
I don't care.
I know you don't care. So it's important for us to be ourselves, our allies to be there to support us, and to show everybody in the community that it's okay to be who you are, and there's a group here to support you. So, any other question? All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This was fun. We hope to see you next time.